Yo, what's up, Emma? Do you have your mic working?
Hey.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, just chilling out. Yeah, I haven't talked to you in a little while. Have things been okay in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm just trying to find a new job, somewhere to live at the moment.
Why,
Um,
why new job?
I can't pass the probation in my job. It's been like 9 months.
I don't get it though. Why not? What's the
Oh,
problem?
targets. All about the
Oh,
target.
oh, okay. You have to like meet some certain criteria or something.
Yeah, they extended my probation for another 3 months, and it got to the end of 3 months. And I was doing really well until like the last month, up until the last week, and then I didn't reach that target, so they had to extend it again. I'm like, I'm not doing this all over for another 3 months. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's like some kind of sales job, right?
kind of, but not really. It's underwriting for a loan company, so
Oh yeah, okay.
they've already gone through the sales pitch and they just want the loan now. So it's just trying to see whether it's affordable for them, make it all legit, like responsible lending and stuff.
Yeah, okay. What are you gonna try to do now?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
Like,
I
I don't know.
I miss when we had tons of your free time and you're like just making tons of videos and stuff.
Yeah, I need to get back to doing that. Everyone keeps saying I should do ASMR, but not
No,
so-
no more underwriting. Just go, you know, tickle paper on camera and get paid for it.
yeah, or just yeah, eating vegan food, stuff like that. I guess that's what people want.
It's one of the weirdest categories of videos that has ever existed, but whatever. If it makes you money, it's all good. Um,
Oh yeah, this is the thing. Yeah.
so I know that you had some things that you wanted to talk about that you messaged me about, but we didn't really get around to it in message. So like, do you still have those things or?
No, not really. I've been working on something else now. I've been trying to learn propositional logic,
Okay.
and like now I know all the different like rules of inference and stuff. I know that I can do like the quiz, whatever, but it's really hard to actually when you listen to someone's argument, trying to formalize it. It's really hard. So that's what I'm trying to do now, and I've got something that I've figured out, but I don't
Um,
know. I was just gonna ask you about that.
are you trying to formalize one of your own arguments or something that someone else has said?
It's a non-vegan argument, yeah.
Okay,
So
what's the argument?
one sec, I've written it down somewhere.
Okay.
Okay, now this is a valid argument, but like I have contentions with the soundness of this argument.
Do you want to post it in the patron chat?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, this is my first attempt at doing something like this, so I don't know how good it is, but we'll see.
Okay. What
It's
made
so stupid. Hang on.
what made you want to formalize this random Okay, well, here, let's see. All right, so it's a hypothetical syllogism, I guess, and we got P1. If it's unclear where moral value is lost in a fetus between embryo and day 180 of gestation, then it's not absurd to be unclear about where moral value is lost in a fetus between embryo and day 180 of gestation. If it's not absurd to be unclear about where moral value is lost in a fetus between embryo and day 180 of gestation, then it's not absurd to reject P2 if your view affirms that it is unclear where moral value is lost in the trait equalization beginning and end points, where a given human is trait equalizable to an animal. Therefore, if it's unclear where moral value is lost in a fetus between embryo and day 180 of gestation, then it's not absurd to reject P2 if your view affirms that it's unclear where moral value is lost in the trait equalization beginning and end points, where a given human is trait equalizable to a given animal. Well, that's kind of like so Well, so like the kind of thing you're trying to say is like, if we can be unclear about where moral value is lost here, we can be unclear about where moral value is lost here too. Now, I don't understand why that would be grounds for rejecting P2, right? Your view either does or doesn't affirm that there is such a point, regardless of whether you know where the point is.
Say that again.
So you don't want to confuse the principled and practical level, right? So whether there in fact is a point is a separate question than whether you know where the point is.
Oh, yeah. See what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, because my contention with it is, like, between the embryo and day 180, you can't really tell where, like day 179. This is how the argument goes. Like, you can't tell, like, day 179, day 178. Like, when do they lose sentience? Do you know what I mean? Where is that point?
Mm-hmm.
But you can tell, like, with a fully sentient being, where moral value is lost, because I don't know, because they're fully sentient. So I think they're separate. They're like,
I mean, just to be clear, why do you think that this would be grounds for rejecting P2? Because let's just say hypothetically someone grants that they don't know where the point is, right?
Yeah.
P2 is just affirming that, on your view, a given human who has moral value, if you equalize all their traits to that of a given animal, moral value is retained, right? P2 is just an affirmation that you do hold a view of that sort. So whether you hold a view of that sort or not isn't contingent on whether you know where the point is. So, like, why would that be a basis for rejecting P2?
Hang on, I'm confused now.
Okay, well,
I need to write it down so I can understand what you just said.
Okay, well, look, I mean, it's P2. Your view affirms a given human is trait equalizable to a given non-human animal while retaining moral value. That's going to be true or not, like, regardless of whether you know, knowing exactly where the point is just going to be orthogonal to whether your view actually says that there is such a point, right? So your view can affirm that a given human is trait equalizable to a given animal while retaining moral value. And on that, if your view says that, then you're just saying that there isn't a point, right? If you're saying that there is a point, but it's blurry, then okay, I think I might see what you're saying. So you're saying you'd avoid having a view that says that the human is trait equalizable while retaining value. You'd say that value is lost at some point, you just don't know where that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then the Carnets could say that, you know, within the trait equalization process, like, it's unclear.
Mm-hmm.
It's unclear. They can't, and they won't name a trait. They don't even get to that point because they just reject P2. Like,
well, you have to. You have to remember that the whole deduction tree is just a prompt in the dialogue flow, right? So if they're not holding a view that's in category X, then you're just not going down that first pathway in the dialogue flow where they give a no answer to question 1. So they'd in fact be giving a yes answer. So open up the dialogue flow. Do you have the dialogue flow?
Yeah. Also, I think cosine's waiting to come in.
Yeah, but cosine is not a $10 patron. We could bring I mean, we don't have many people right now. I think that Vilk is watching the stream or something, and I don't know, I think people have just gotten busy. If you want, we can bring cosine in too. That's your choice.
Yeah, I don't mind. It's up to you if you're stream.
Sure.
I had this down for Tuesday night because
yeah, what up, cosine?
Oh yeah, you moved me in.
Well, I mean, Emma was feeling it, and I mean, I always like talking to you, But technically, the live streams, usually we do it with the $10 patrons. But if they want to open it up to other people, I'm always fine to do that too. How are you doing?
Oh, nice. I'm fine.
Cool, cool. Yeah. So let's go to the dialogue flow. Or well, Emma, do you want to bring other people in here too? We can also bring in, like, there's tons of $10 of under $10 patrons. Like, I can put out a buzz for them too, and if we want to get more people. But if we want to keep it small, we can just have us three.
I don't actually mind. Like, yeah, bring him in or wait a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, sure. I'll send out a little buzz and
Yeah.
we'll just let them know. Okay. Patron.
Hey, Coastline, how are you?
Hey, what's up?
I'm good, thanks.
I'm going to a strawberry farm.
Oh,
Water some strawberries.
slaughtering them.
Sounds
Yeah,
barbaric.
I gotta milk them. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just go to the dialogue flow, and if you guys see anyone collect in the patron channel, just let me know so I can drag them in. Or you can drag them in, actually, Emma, can't you? Maybe you can't. I don't know if you have I don't think you actually have perms for this channel. Never mind. So yeah, do you have the dialogue flow open?
Yeah, the purple one.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So if they answer no to the first question, that's going to take them over to
Yeah.
the deduction tree, right? So if you have someone who's saying that there is a point where value is lost, they just don't know where it is. They're not even going down that pathway, right? So
Yeah.
So yeah, you wouldn't be using that argument in that case. So if they say yes, then the next question is, do you know which traits define that point? Now, if they say no, there's going to be an absurdity there, right? Because if we have the trait equalization beginning point and we have the trait equalization end point, and at the beginning you have a human and at the end you have an animal, if you don't know where moral value is lost, you're telling me that you're uncertain of the moral status of the beings in between those 2 points. Well, what kind of beings are in between those 2 points? Well, for example, a human with hoofs. Right, so imagine saying that you're uncertain of the moral status of a human with hoofs.
Yeah. So this argument hinges on them saying yes to the first question, basically. I haven't factored that in into this argument.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you wouldn't ever run the argument on someone who doesn't have a view that affirms a human is trait equalizable while retaining value.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're just going to say they're not trait equalizable while retaining value, that there is a point where value is lost, you just wouldn't even move over to the deduction. You'd end up going down the other side of the dialogue flow. So then you'd end up at, do you know which traits define this point? And then if they say yes, you're going to get into, okay, what is the trait? And if they say no, then there's just this reductio of apparently they're uncertain of the moral status of the beings in between the trait equalization beginning and end point. They don't know where value is lost. They're uncertain if it's lost when you're talking about a human with hoofs. I mean, that sounds patently insane, does it not?
Yeah, of course.
So just picture like a spectrum, and picture like at one end there's a human and at the other there's an animal, and then there's a bunch of iterations in between where you just modify like just a characteristic of the human just one by one until you reach the animal. Now, if you say you're not, picture it like a bunch of frames, like in a movie or something. If you're saying you don't know which frames have moral value or not, like you don't know where moral value is lost, you don't know where it's going to be and where it's not going to be, you're telling me that you're just uncertain of the moral status of all the beings in the frames in between the first and last frame.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And what kind of beings are in there? Well, there's a human with hoofs, or there's a human with a tail, right? There's beings who are subjectively identical to us, who could live in our society, who, if they were wearing shoes, you wouldn't even know they have hoofs. They just seem like a totally normal human. And apparently you'd be saying that it's okay, or, well, not necessarily that it's okay to murder them. You'd just be saying that you don't know what their moral status is, right?
Yeah, but I mean in this argument, I mean, it's you can be unclear where moral value is lost between the gestation stages of embryo and day 180. So
What?
really, No, I don't actually agree.
Well,
I don't actually agree with this argument.
well,
like,
there's
I have
no,
issues with it.
well,
But...
well, with this argument, there's just not even any need for an argument here. Like, if the goal is to reject P2, all you have to say is just that there's a point where value is lost. There's no need to make an analogy to a fetus or something like this. You just say, well, no, like, there is a point where value is lost. So I don't have a view that says that the human is trait equalizable while retaining value. So there's not even a need for an argument. You can just say, no, I just don't have a position like that.
So you can say that you don't know where moral value is lost in the gestation?
Why would we talk about gestation? It just seems like I don't even know why we talk about it. Like if the idea is you're trying to resist the deduction, all you need to say to resist the deduction is just that I don't have a view where moral value is lost. I have a view where moral value is lost at some point in the trait equalization process. Further questions about where that point is, we can get around to that, and there's a reductio if you don't know where the point is. But if you're just trying to avoid the deduction, yeah, I mean, all you'd say is just that, like, no, I just hold a view where there is some point where moral value is lost. There's no need for an argument. You just say that, and then the deduction's just not going to apply to you. But then you're going to be funneled down the other side of the dialogue tree. So, like, you have to think of the purpose the deduction plays, right? So, like, the dialogue flow, you just ask this initial opening question. On your current moral view, if all traits true of a given human who has moral value are switched to match those true of a given non-human animal who doesn't have moral value, is there any point in the trait equalization process where moral value is lost? Now, if someone says no to that, that's when the deduction comes up, because they've affirmed the things that are necessary for the deduction to show contradiction on their view, right? They've said human has value, animal doesn't have value, all traits can be equalized and value is retained. That doesn't make any sense, because if all traits can be equalized and value is retained, that implies the animal has value, but you're saying the animal doesn't have value. So you're going to get the kind of contradiction that's explained by the dialogue or the deduction tree. So you would never have someone say no to that first question. So they're saying there's no point where moral value is lost, and then try to resist the deduction by saying there is a point where moral value is lost. They'd just be contradicting the initial statement that led them into the deduction. Do you follow me, or am I just kind of like... I could be more condensed if you want.
So what is this person who has this argument saying then? Are they saying yes or no?
This argument? This argument just seems unnecessary. It just seems to me like what the whole point of this argument is just to reject P2. But it's unclear where moral value is lost. I mean, being unclear about where moral value is lost doesn't actually tell you like whether they reject P2 or not, right? It's if there's a point where moral value is lost, not whether you can tell where it is. That's going to tell you if you can reject P2 of that argument. So I mean, there's just no need for an argument there. All you have to say is just that, on my view, there is such a point, and then the deduction's not going to apply to you, right? But then you're giving a yes answer to the first question in the dialogue flow tree, which is going to take you to the second question. Do you know where that point is? Now, if you say no to that, going by the reasoning in this thing here, I'm just not sure where the point is, then you're going to end up at this situation where you're saying, okay, human has value, animal doesn't have value, here's all the frames in the middle, I don't know about the moral status of the beings in here. And that's going to be absurd because there's beings in there like a human with hoofs.
Mm-hmm. And you can say where moral value is lost in a fetus anyway, it's just that you might not be able to identify what day it's lost.
Well, yeah, I mean, the other thing is, like, I think you're looking for a degree of precision that I would never look for. Like, I'm not looking for someone to be able to tell me down to, like, the, like, picosecond or something, like, where moral value is lost. Like, we're just looking for any kind of general description that's not going to have some absurd consequence, right? So someone could say moral value is lost, like, somewhere around, like, IQ of like 75 to 80, right? So they can have some gray area there, but you know, that gray area, it's gonna look absurd even allowing that gray area, which is fine. I don't mind there being a gray area where you're uncertain about the status. That seems unavoidable once you get down to a microscopic enough level on what the traits are. So the fact that there's that gray area, I mean, that's fine. It's more just that the framing they've given, that somewhere between IQ of 75 or 80 values loss, it doesn't matter if it's at 75 or 80, either of those would have an absurd consequence. Now, the problem is if you try to say that the whole equalization process is the gray area, then you end up in this situation where you're just saying that you're uncertain of the status of a human with hoofs.
Yeah, which is ridiculous.
Well, maybe someone doesn't find it ridiculous, but yeah, most people would say a human who's exactly like you, if they were just, you know, they just one day saw their buddy take his shoes off and they were hoofs, most people wouldn't say, well, yeah, I'm uncertain if it's okay to murder him now. Like, that just, most people, I think, would probably find that pretty insane. Yeah, so So I'm not sure what else I could say. So if you want to avoid the deduction, right? You have to remember what the purpose of the deduction is. So the conclusion of the deduction is that therefore your view can only deny the non-human animal has moral value on pain of contradiction, right? So basically, if you look at the dialogue flow, it's just the deduction is just like a prompt where if they try to give a no answer to that first question, you just hit them with this unbreakable deductive argument, and then they're just basically fucked, right? There's just nothing they can say. Like, they just have a view that's contradictory, unless they're going to reject one of the premises of name the trait, which would be, you know, if they were to reject P2, they'd be directly contradicting the statements that led them into the deduction in the first place, right? If they're saying there is a point, which is, you know, kind of like how you reject P2, then they'd be contradicting the statement that led them there, that there isn't a point, right? So they'd have to backtrack to do that. And rejecting P1 just seems impossible to me. Like, I just have no idea how someone could reject P1. So, yeah, you just have to understand the whole conclusion of the deduction is just that certain types of views contradict themselves, and the type of views that contain that contradiction are the views that say no to the first question in the dialogue flow tree. So if you get a no, you bring up the deduction, you show that that view has a contradiction in it. Now, if on the other hand, they say yes, there is a point, right? And then you ask your second question in the dialogue flow, which is, do you know where that point is? And they say no, then you're at the situation where they're saying that the whole equalization process, other than just the 2 points at the end, is gray. And that's just absurd, right? That's going to have crazy reductios. And then when you bring up those reductios, then they're going to have to move to like a hoofed human and say, okay, well, like at minimum that has value. Then it's the gray area between the hoofed human and the animal. And they're going to have to keep narrowing it down until they either end up at something that's not absurd, or they hit some kind of like crazy point and try to stick it out on that, right? So it's just going to turn into pretty normal name the trait. So do you follow sort of what I'm getting at here?
Oh yeah. No, I know the dialogue flow tree pretty well.
Yeah. So bottom line, if someone wants to get out of the deduction, just say that there is a point. And if someone says there is a point, but I'm just not clear where it is, then they're saying the whole equalization process is a gray area, which has a pretty hilarious reductio.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be possible for there to not be a point, would there?
Well, what, Jack? Sorry, I almost called you Jack. What, Bryn?
It would be possible. It would just be crazy.
Your sound.
So bad.
It would be possible. It would just be crazy because then what they would be saying is that moral value is not predicated upon anything.
Okay.
Well, let's.
Basically, it would mean it would just mean that like you'd get to the end of the trait equalization process, and the only value difference would be moral value, and then you would just say, you know, these two things that are the same, it's just a brute fact that one has different moral value from the other, which, you know, at least autobiographically, that seems crazy.
Okay.
But yeah, you can say that there is no trait, but that's just going to lead to the contradiction.
Yeah, well, exactly right. So if you say that there's no trait, there's going to be actually a contradiction on that view. So that's, you can't,
right.
That now, to be clear, what's being said altogether, if you say there's no trait, is there's a human has value, start of the process has value, animal doesn't have value, and there's no point in alternating their properties where you go from value to not value, right? So that's just going to be insane, because the point of having all the traits of the animal is like in that process, right? So how could it be that you hit that point and value isn't lost, yet you're saying animals don't have value? That's where the contradiction is. So yeah, you can say there's no trait, but you'd have to be willing to contradict yourself. So you'd have to be like, you know, maybe you could be a dialectheist and try to say this is like a true contradiction or something, but you have to go to pretty extreme positions to try to get to say there's no trait and hold it down like that.
I don't know that it has to be a contradiction. It only has to be a contradiction if moral value is disincluded from the set of traits. If it were just like the fact that the only trait remaining, or that moral value were not different, or were different, then that wouldn't be like a contradiction. It would just be like kind of a crazy view, which is just to say that moral value isn't based upon anything. There's nothing that grounds it.
I'm not sure what exactly you mean. It can't be that you equalize all the traits, right, which includes moral value, but then moral value is not equalized.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, yeah, like if you got to the point, right, where the only proposition left was in one animal, this animal has moral value, and in the other animal, it's this animal doesn't have moral value. Like, that doesn't necessarily have to be a contradiction. It would have to be a contradiction if it were the case that the propositions, this animal has moral value and this animal doesn't have moral value, were true. But I don't know if they're beholden to that.
It just means that moral value is just arbitrary.
Well,
yeah, it just means, like, to me, it just makes it that it's a brute fact, unless they include those as two different propositions, in which case it is a contradiction.
Yeah, if what you're saying is that you could say that the trait is moral value, right? Is that like what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of.
So like you could equalize out every single trait, but moral value.
That.
What?
No, you're just totally cutting out now.
Come back, Bryn. Bryn. R.I.P.
That's one thing that they could do, right? And then, well,
What?
We cannot hear you even a little
Yeah,
sounds like Fedo.
Yeah, I just have no idea.
But then
Yeah, Bryn, it's not happening. You got to get to some better sound.
it just would be the case.
This is horrible.
Would be
Just
the
a
case.
long-
Yeah,
God.
Bryn, you need to get to better sound. We just can't hear you. But yeah, I mean, if you're saying that moral value is the trait, right? Is that what you're talking about? You equalize everything out, but then moral value remains unchanged because moral value is the trait that separates the final part of the trait equalization process from one step before.
I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
He said,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but that's not saying there's no trait. That's saying moral value is the trait.
Right.
Oh, it's just so hopeless.
That moral value is not predicated on.
Yeah, you'd be just saying that it's its own, like, just its own thing, like floating there that just changes on its own or something. Yeah, so yeah, that's true. So you can say that moral value itself is the trait. That would be a separate thing than saying that there's no trait, though. Those are a little different. The no trait view is the one that leads to contradiction. If you say that moral value is the trait, that's going down like a separate pathway.
Wait, wouldn't that still be the point in which you swap from one to another?
I don't know what that
Doesn't
means.
that still take? Well, the original question I asked is that there has to be, like, if you're saying one thing has value and something else doesn't, then there has to be some point in between. There has to be something that differentiates them, right? I think I think that's how we open this up. And
Yeah,
you're
but
saying, no,
what
you
he's
just brute force it on there.
no, what he's getting at is like moral value itself could be a trait. So you equalize every other trait, and then you've got something that is in all respects identical to an animal, but it has value. And then one more step would be an animal that doesn't have value, right? So two animals that are identical in every way, except that one has value and one doesn't. Which is different than saying that there's no trait. It's the no trait view that's going to lead to contradiction, which is what the deduction tree is for. I don't know if Bryn can talk, but I think we're not. I don't think we're disagreeing there. Are we disagreeing about anything?
No, it sounds like that's right.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that then? If they just one has moral value, the other doesn't. That's the only trait left.
Yeah.
Just an absurd position.
Well, the weird thing about saying that moral value isn't attached to any other traits is you have to know where it changes, right? And they should be able to describe where moral value is lost relative to other traits. They should be able to say which trait switches before moral value and which trait, what's coming after. Now, if they can't do that, right, then they just have no idea where moral value is lost in the equalization process, and that's going to seem pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah, it will seem crazy, but some people could just say it's just a brute fact, and they just particularly perceive it. But it would be crazy because they wouldn't be able to give an interesting account of why babies have value, or why their grandmother has value, or whatever. They would just be like, I just sort of think that she does, or I just sort of think that they do.
But I'm trying to draw a slight distinction here. So there's also whether someone can state where moral value is lost, right? So if you can't actually state where moral value is lost, because there's stating where it is comes down to saying which traits are changed either when moral value changes or before it changes, right? So you should be able to position where moral value is lost somewhere in the trait equalization process. Now, if you can't do that, you just have that same reductio of we're just uncertain. So what? The whole equalization in between the two beings is just gray, apparently. We just don't know. You can't position where moral value is lost. All you're going to say is moral value is lost when moral value is lost. Well, I mean, yeah, you can go ahead, right? But the whole thing is that then we don't know where that is, and that just leaves us uncertain what you think about all the beings in between the trait equalization beginning and end point.
Well, yeah, I think the point is that they don't. It's just you pointed something and you say that has moral value, and then there's really nothing. There's no reasoning behind it. That's just something that you just chose for whatever reason. It doesn't. I mean, there doesn't even have to be. It could be. You got to roll the dice. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it'd just be like a fatalistic attitude, right? Where it's just, this is just a value property that's brute.
Well, wait, that has the way you just said it there, Cosine, would have a really hilarious reductio. If you just said that it's, what did you say? It's just you roll the dice? Imagine just saying that where moral value is lost, you just roll the dice. It might be at a human with a cow tail. It might be somewhere else. That would seem crazy to most people.
Well, no, but that would make moral value contingent, so that doesn't work.
Yeah. That's just a poor analogy, because that would be that would be the reason you could point to,
right?
Is whatever the value of the dice.
Right. What we're looking for, right, is something like a fatalistic attitude, where there isn't any contingency. It's just necessarily the case, but for no actual doxastic reason why this thing has moral value and this thing doesn't. It just sort of is the case.
Right, but so the question though is when in the trait equalization process is the value actually lost? Are they able to answer that, or do they not know?
Yeah, it just wouldn't.
Wait, sorry, wait, I don't understand what it means to say it wouldn't. Value wouldn't be lost?
Yeah, it just wouldn't be lost.
No, that view leads to contradiction. If you say value is not lost, then you get to the position that the animal has and doesn't have value.
I'm not sure I agree, because I would just take that to be the only thing that remains would be the proposition about moral value, which I would just include in the set of traits.
Well, wait a second. If you wait a second. If you've equalized all traits, right, then moral value is in there, right? So you've equalized all traits and value is retained. To then say that value isn't there in the animal, that's just a contradiction, because you're going to be saying that it's the case that that being has and doesn't have value. So there's distinction. The distinction here is between naming moral value as the trait and saying that there's no trait. The no trait view is going to lead to contradiction.
Right, at that point, right, the only proposition remaining would be about moral value.
No, not on the no trait view. No, yeah, on the no trait view, you can equalize everything and moral value is retained, but animals don't have value. That's the view that's going to be contradictory.
I took no trait view to mean that there's no antecedent cause to moral value. If we're strictly talking about no trait whatsoever, then that's necessarily contradictory.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Now
that will always be a contradiction.
Right. Exactly. Now what you're doing is you're saying there is a trait and the trait is just moral value, and I'm not able to say, like, the problem with that, right, is that if you say the trait is moral value, there's not necessarily going to be a logical contradiction. The problem is that we have no clue when the trait moral value disappears. Does it disappear always at the same time in the trait equalization process? Does it disappear just randomly? Right? So the whole problem is that then we get all these beings, all these different iterations in between human and animal, and moral value is apparently lost at some point, but you don't know where that is, right? Which leaves that whole area in between the starting and ending point morally gray, which is going to seem absurd.
Well, I don't know if it has to be morally gray. I think that they could just say that it just retains the brute fact of moral value the entire way through.
Okay, that's a bit different though. That's
just a label.
Wait a second. That's a tiny bit different, because then they're saying that moral value is lost at a particular point, and it's at the very end of the trait equalization process, one step away from becoming an animal. That's different than just saying moral value is lost and I don't know where it is.
Right.
So if you say I don't know where it is that it's lost, that's when you're going to end up at a view where the whole equalization process is gray. And if you end up at it's lost one step away from full equalization, when you have an animal who only differs with respect to moral value, that's going to go to a shell morality position, where you can find So there's different. That's gonna happen, right? So there's a lot of nuance around some of these. So there's 3 different positions here, and they all have distinct reductios or distinct kind of things you have to point out about them. So the first is the no trait position. That just leads to contradiction. That's just saying you can equalize all the traits and value is retained, but the animal doesn't have value. You're saying the animal has and doesn't have value. You're saying all traits are equalized and all traits aren't equalized. That position is just contradictory. Now, if you say there is a point where moral value is lost, and it's the point where moral value is lost, and I don't know where that is, that has the hoofed human reductio, right? You're saying that you're uncertain of the moral status of all the beings in between the trait equalization beginning and endpoint. And then thirdly, if you say moral value is the trait, and moral value is lost only after all other traits are equalized, and you have an animal who's one step away from being the given animal, and the only separator is moral value, that's the point where moral value is lost. The reductio on that is a shell morality position, when you can find a human who is subjectively identical to the given animal, who apparently has value by virtue of whatever else is there serving as a shell, but then you can have a subjectively identical animal that doesn't have value. So you're saying, like, the minds of those humans, if they were just in different shells, it would be fine to holocaust them. So you're going to get a shell morality position there. So it's either contradiction, hoofed human reductio, or shell morality, depending on which of those you take. No trait, moral value is the trait, or moral value is the trait, and it's only at the very end of the process that it switches.
Yeah, shell morality is the one that I think I was analyzing. It's just like there's no antecedent cause to morality.
Well, and the reason it would be a shell position is if value is retained all throughout the equalization process, then when we have a human who's been cognitively equalized to the animal, they're still going to have value. So you're saying that subjective experience has value, but then at the end, the animal doesn't have value, right? So you're saying there's beings that are subjectively identical, one has value and one doesn't. That opens you up to all these things like, you know, if the babies, all the minds of babies were just in another possible world and were just not in human shells, it would just be fine to holocaust all the babies on Earth, right? Like, that's the kind of position that that'll lead you to.
Baby daffodil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any position that allows for subjectivity to be equalized and value retained in the human, but that still says the animal doesn't have value, is going to come out as some kind of shell position. That's like the ingredients for a shell position. That subjectivity can be equalized and values retained in the human but not in the animal. That's where you're saying their consciousness, you can have consciousness that's the same, but in some situations it apparently just doesn't have value by virtue of some other random characteristic that's not about sentience. Yeah, so I don't think we disagree at all. Is there anything that we're disagreeing on here? I'll take that deafening silence as a no. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, do we have more to say about that, or should we just, like, move it along? I mean, you opened this all, Emma, with your friggin' weird abortion thing.
You know, I actually emailed Destiny because he's been struggling a lot with the sentience thing. I don't know what that's about. He even talked to a political science vegan who also was having a lot of trouble answering the coma problem.
Yeah, you just need Avi. I mean, it's so easy to answer. All you have to say is that I value beings, even non-sentient beings that have achieved sentience in the... Hey, Jack, or sorry, not Jack, Bryn, you have to change that name. Can you mute your mic? You're just got mad background noise. Bryn, your background noise. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
I just muted him. He can unmute himself.
Okay. What was the thing we were talking about?
The coma.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, no, you just say I give moral value to anything that has previously attained sentience and has the potential to gain it back. So that's going to cover someone who's like sleeping. That's going to cover like you know, someone who's been like permanently had or had their sentience like turned off temporarily or something. But it's not going to cover beings who haven't yet achieved sentience. So it's really easy to construct some consistent way to get around that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I guess the abortion thing has been like a really big topic on like Destiny's side of the world, and he's talked to like at least 2 or 3 different people, and including himself, who just like can't get to that. They're just like, I don't know, I guess there's no way, I don't know what to do, it's just gonna be this gray thing until somebody can figure it out.
I don't know why they'd be gray on that. It just seems so kind of like easy to find a solution to. Like,
well, it's because, and I see this in the the server a lot, because it's colloquially, a lot of the vegans are just like, I value sentience, and they hear everybody else say that, and they don't know that it's actually a little bit more nuanced than that, but they never really, they're never really exposed to that side, so they think that it actually is just sentience hard stop, and that's where they all get stuck on. And
there is actually something else to consider here. Emma, can you mute while you're scraping your ASMR or whatever you're doing?
I don't really hear me, sorry.
Yeah, so the other thing is there's a little bit of nuance here in that I do, in a sense, value those unborn fetuses, like in a way. I don't value them specifically, but I value making the universe better, and insofar as we assume that them coming into existence will increase the well-being to suffering ratio, then I think it would be good, morally, to bring them into existence, right? So I can acknowledge that it would be good to bring them into existence if they'll have a positive effect on the ratio, while simultaneously saying that there's no rights violation, there's no you know, like violation of any kind of utilitarian principle there when I say that you don't have an obligation to a being that's not yet sentient. There's also really funny reductios on some of the positions that come up here. Like, there's a very common position where people say, I value the potential for life, and that has hilarious consequences. So like, if you have my favorite is to assume the possibility of artificial minds and then say that we get to a point where we can create them. And then you have to ask, like, when is the point where we start creating the artificial mind? I'm fine just watching it after. I want to get Kit on here. Kit, I'll be friendly. We're done in a few anyway. If you want to ask something, just
Yeah, I
hop
gotta
on.
go in just a minute.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be here till about 4. I would normally go a bit longer, but I only have time for an hour today. But yeah, what was I gonna say? So the really funny one is you ask, when does the... Okay, so when exactly do we start creating a being? Now, you can argue it back to like the...
What?
Well, yeah.
Oh, okay, never mind. I forgot what we were talking about, and that sentence just like really tripped me out.
Yeah, like you can argue it all the way back to like the beginning of the universe or something, but like if you just say like, look, I think that we start creating the being like when the sperm meets the egg. It's like, well, wait, why were we not on trajectory to creating a being? Why was the potential not there when the sperm was separate from the egg 1 second before, or 1 second before that? And then why was it not that there was the potential there just, you know, when I decided that I was going to have sex with you or something like that, right? So when you do artificial minds, you get to these funny reductios of like, the moment that someone has a will to turn a block of metal into an AI, then that block of metal like gains moral value or something. So
I mean, you could go further than that with like some fatalist view. You could just be like at the beginning of whatever, it was just on track for that to happen.
I don't even really understand what fatalism is. Let's just look that up. Fatalism, philosophical doctrine that stresses the subjugation of all events or actions to destiny. Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds kind of like, I mean, it sounds a little like determinism, like things are just kind of destined to go a certain way, but it sounds like there's a negative connotation there.
Well, it'd be like, you can have things that are, you can have determinism, and there's like some like really specific way where you can have determinism and not fatalism, and so they're like separate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing here on SEP, it's commonly used to refer to an attitude of resignation in the face of some future event or events which are thought to be inevitable. Philosophers usually use the word to refer to the view that we are powerless to do anything other than what we actually do. I might even like agree on some level with that. I don't know, but I just think that there's just some of the language there has connotations that I would rather avoid.
It's only like a slight push away from determinism, but there's some like really, there's some decent differentiation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even with determinism, it's really important to be careful about our language, because with so many of these views, it's easy to give a bad, I guess the best word I can use is like a bad vibe. Like, you give people some kind of notion that things are really bad if you don't explain yourself carefully. Like with determinism, if you're not kind of careful about things, then people can end up with these really like depressed attitudes, right? People will be like, well, like, what's the point of anything if everything's just going to happen? And you kind of have to like break through that. You have to be like, look, do you care about like well-being? If you're talking to a utilitarian or something, they'll be like, yeah, like I do. So I'll be like, okay, so like you are happy that animal or that human or whatever, that they're experiencing well-being. They'll be like, yeah. It's like, okay, so why would you be any less happy about that if that well-being were determined to happen? Like, if what you care about is the well-being, I mean, it's there on determinism or not, so it's not clear why you'd be upset if things were determined.
Yeah, Brandon references a lot whenever he first joined the server and hadn't yet been exposed to determinism. I was like talking to him a little bit about it, and then like he was like, all right, I gotta go. And I was like, don't forget, Bryn, everyone will always have more influence over you than you'll ever have on yourself. And he was just like, oh my god.
Oh, also, have you guys seen me trolling AIU on Twitter?
That's hilarious.
No,
the syllogism thing and the
I saw your video this morning though. That was good.
Yeah, I'm
he
glad
applies
you liked
to
it.
or something like that.
Yeah.
You just like say like random logical sentences.
Yeah, what was the first one again? There was 3, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, like I've determined. I think the first was syllogism, the second was modus ponens, and then today I woke up and I tweeted him. What did I say? I said like, I don't even remember which one I sent today. I said like, hey, Devin, material biconditional. So my thing now is that I'm pretty sure that Devin is just triggered by logic. So now I just tweet random words from logic at him. I just say like, hey Devin, hypothetical syllogism, and I think that it's just gonna torment his mind.
Maybe I'll start trolling him as well.
Yeah, if we can get to the point that everyone trolls him in the same way, that would be pretty hilarious. And yeah, I mean, oh, bye cosine. His video, like that video that Destiny was responding to, geez, what a fucking shit show that was. I would love if AIU would ever debate anyone who's actually got a brain, but it's just not gonna happen. He just won't.
I haven't seen that video yet. I need to check it out.
Yeah, it's really stupid. He just makes so many bad inferences. Just standard, like, AIU nonsense. What up, Vilk? Just
Can you hear me?
It's a weird whisper greeting. Yo.
Sup, homie?
Oh, you can hear me, okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
It's the break in the game and we're winning.
Nice, nice. I'm happy for you.
Who's winning?
Barcelona.
Ah.
Barcelona. I can't say it like you. When I say it, it sounded kind of like an Italian when I said it. Barcelona.
Today is a small group. Nice. How are you guys?
Well, I mean, we're all doing pretty okay. We talked a bunch about some abortion thing and talked a little about fatalism. I forget the topics now, but yeah. Is there anything that you want to talk about, Vilk?
I just I made a friend watch a Dominion with me.
Oh yeah.
Were they non-vegan?
I think so, pretty much.
And what effect did it have?
Like, he's still thinking about it. Like, he already was like eating meat only once a week. It's like I felt like it's the push he needed, and it sucked watching it, but it will be worth it in the long run.
Yeah, it's hard to get people to actually sit through it. It's really weird because I think that what's happening in their brain is that they actually know that watching it will show them something that is gonna be really uncomfortable for them and probably like compel some action from them. And they're like resistant to that. They're like, I don't want to change. I don't want to learn how bad things are. It's very weird how people, how some people don't want to see the footage. Like,
yeah, that's exactly what happened to me before I went vegan. I did vegan for health mainly first, and then I decided to watch Earthlings because I wanted to stay vegan. I was like, if I watch that, I can't really go back, and I sort of put it off for like a week, and then I did, and I was like, ugh.
Well, and I
guess I'm vegan now for the rest of my life.
I think it's like it's annoying too because oh, what was I about to say about that? About watching it. Oh yeah, so when you're trying to interact with people about veganism but they haven't actually seen the footage, assuming your goal is actually to persuade them, it can be very frustrating because there's certain kinds of arguments people will make or thought processes that they'll get into where they're getting into these very like abstract kind of philosophical bullshit arguments, and they just would not go down those pathways if they actually were really viscerally aware of what they're arguing for, right? It's like there's certain things that like maybe some people still would, but there's a lot of people who wouldn't start making fucking stupid arguments about like, you know, maybe animals don't have minds, or maybe it's okay to, you know, kill the disabled or some shit like this, if they actually viscerally were like really aware of and like thinking about just you know, an animal just being stabbed in the throat, right? But when that's just this abstraction in your head, then you're more likely to make like all these kind of stupid arguments, right?
Yeah, because it doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem real until you see it,
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's just abstract, like you say. It's not.
It's
it doesn't actually happen.
We like
Sorry, you cut out, Vilk. What?
And I made my case very clear, and he's like, yeah, I know you're right, but what if I still want to eat like an hamburger once a week? And I told him, there's nothing I can tell you that will convince you other than to watch it. And as soon as we finished watching it, he was like, he told me there's no gray, it's black and white, and he's convinced pretty much.
Well, I mean, that's good. At least it came across clearly to him once you actually showed it to him. And then there's something else I was going to say about it. Oh yeah. So I've always just had a really like a particular kind of attitude about these things. Like I just care about knowing what's actually happening. Like I never want the truth hidden from me. Like I'm the kind of person who like you know how some people say weird things like, you know, if my girlfriend is cheating on me, like I just wouldn't want to know. Like if everything's good, I'd rather be unaware. Like I could never understand perspectives like that. Like I guess it could make sense logically if what you care about is your own well-being and you think it's best maximized by not knowing certain things, but it's just not how my character is. Like I want to know what's actually real. So if you tell me that I'm participating in like the worst Holocaust ever, I would just never, like I just can't even explain how far away this is from my thinking. Like I would never have the reaction to that of I don't want to see it. That just seems so fucking weird to me. Like my reaction would immediately be, well, what are you talking about? Like I need to know what you're talking about. I want to see this. What is it that I'm supporting?
Yeah, because the truth does maximize your well-being.
It's not, but
make you
wait.
suffer, like...
But this is prior to any of that. This isn't like a rational, like I have come to the position that I always want to know the truth because it maximizes well-being. I think you can defend something like that too. That's a pretty safe general principle. Truth usually maximizes well-being. I think that's probably true. But for me, this isn't even a rational evaluation. Like this is like an attitude I've had since I was a kid, well before knowing anything about logic or philosophy. I've just always very firmly had this attitude of wanting to know what's actually going on. Like you could have told me as a kid that I'm supporting some horrible thing, and I wouldn't have had the attitude of I don't want to see it. And you know, it would be like if there's like a class full of people and a bunch of people were all sitting there going, I don't want to see, or like you can leave the room and a bunch of people leave the room. I would just never be one of the people who would leave the room. Like I would just want to know what's going on. That's just how I am.
Yeah, it's the same with me actually.
Yeah, well, I think that it's probably more. I bet vegans are like that at a higher rate than the general population. I would not be surprised if that were true.
Yeah, most likely.
But yeah, it's really hard for me to get, like, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to put myself in that position of just being like maybe just like scared of what you'll see or something, or like just worried that it'll like radically alter like how you're feeling or something. Like maybe that's what, like I just can't picture it. Like I just don't understand what is it that makes someone not want to see reality.
I think it's just sometimes people don't know how to handle their own emotions. Like, they just don't know. Like if they've never experienced something before, they're just scared of seeing it for the first time or something because they don't know how to handle it.
That could be true.
So they're scared of how they will react. Like they might get really angry or upset, and then they're worried about what people will think of them. I don't know, something like that maybe. That's
fully possible. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I find it hard to really get what's going on there. I mean, Vilk has just shown us all reality, though. Look at this fucking sushi. That looks glorious.
It's amazing. That's where I took him.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, vegans are just so friendly. They're like, hey, look, I'll like show you a brutal massacre, but then I'm gonna take you out for sushi. I'm gonna like sweet talk you into the. Oh, okay. Yeah, so you're like warming him up for the horror shows. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah.
Guess what, guys? Guess what? Got some good news as well. James Aspey has asked me to create a page in his new ebook. It's going to be a vegan recipe book. Yeah, and it's going to have like, I can say who I am and stuff, and like tell people, you know, give them tips on how to go vegan and what to eat if they're not sure, if they're thinking about going vegan and stuff like that.
Yeah,
really
I mean,
cool. And I get to get like a discount code to give to everyone to buy the book and stuff. So I get a bit of commission.
Well, yeah, that sounds great.
So cool,
I didn't even know he was making a book. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, he hasn't really announced it yet, so keep it under wraps. But
you just announced it on a Patreon live stream.
Whoops. No, it's all good.
Okay. You could say it's a $10 sneak peek.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah, that's cool though. Congrats.
I don't know. Yeah, I need some ideas for recipes. So.
Well, I don't know. Don't you have like a favorite recipe or something?
Banana icon. Do you like curry?
Yeah, of course. I had one tonight actually. I made.
I can teach you how to make the best carry tofu.
That sounds good. Yeah, send me that recipe.
Wait, I'll send a picture.
Okay, we're all waiting, Vilk. The anticipation is just kind of crazy right now. Like,
Yeah.
what are...
Continue talking. It will take like 2 minutes.
No,
It's
we
gonna
all need to
say sushi.
sit. Let's all sit in silence and just wait. Yeah, it's funny. What are you doing with the rest of your day, Emma?
Well, it's like 9 o'clock now, so not much.
True.
Might do
True.
some yoga, do some more propositional logic stuff, learning.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
was another thing I was going to ask you actually about
Sure.
how, like, when somebody gives you like an argument and you just don't understand it, how do you put it into formal logic? What's like the first thing that you would do to try and formalize it?
It would depend on the argument, but you have to try to reduce it down to statements that can, like, you want to try to reduce it down to propositions. Like, ask yourself, like, what are the kind of propositions that are in here? What inferences do I think they're making? Some people just actually aren't saying anything coherent. So, like, when you ask them for an argument or to give you anything that's even roughly like an argument, they actually can't do it. Like, that's kind of like what happened that is literally what happened when I debated Foot Soldier, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if that happens, then you're good to go. I mean, the other side just can't formulate a position. But if you're trying to help them do it, the best you can do is, like, look, just spell it out to me in as few words as possible, and I'm just, oh wow, that curry does look really good. You should send me that recipe.
Wow.
I will send it.
Yeah, the best you can do is just ask them to say it in as few words as possible, and then just try to extract propositions from it and try to put connectives in there. But if they literally, like, they just can't give you an argument, there's not much you can do. Like, they just don't have an argument if that's the case.
Yeah. And then once you put it into like propositions, how do you know what rules of inference to use to put it all together?
Well,
Does it just become apparent?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle almost. Like, if they don't know anything about logic, it'll be muddled. So you just have to be like, I mean, first of all, some part of it must be the conclusion, right? So, like, that would be a good starting point. Like, what's the conclusion that they're trying to reach?
Yeah.
So maybe find out what that is and try to get that down to some basic propositional form, like P, or like P implies something, or like whatever the conclusion is. And then from there, you can sort of visualize what kind of forms might get you there. Like, if the conclusion's P, you could get there from modus ponens, like P implies Q. Or sorry, if it's P, if it were Q, whatever. Either way, you could get there via modus ponens, or maybe if it's an implication, maybe you could get there with like a hypothetical syllogism or something, or maybe you could get there via modus ponens where the Q is actually like an implication, like P implies like Q implies R, and then P, therefore Q implies R. So, like, you just have to, I would say start with the conclusion, see if you can get a clear conclusion, and then you can kind of picture what sort of forms might lead to that conclusion, and maybe like pull things out of the text they've given you and try to form something there.
So you just like play around with it until it kind of makes sense.
I think so. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's possible that someone, like, I don't know, maybe a logician would give you like some kind of set of tools for like how to try to best translate natural language into arguments in prop logic. But I mean, if someone's thoughts are muddled enough, it's just going to be really hard. Like, if they already are thinking relatively logically, you can always get them to say something that's pretty coherent. Like, with like vegan gains or something. Like, I showed him some prop logic the other day. But, like, for example, he doesn't know all that stuff, right? So, like, if you ask him for an argument, he'll give you, like, he'll just say something at you. And then if you say, like, okay, can I have, like, premises and a conclusion? He'll be like, he'll give you something like, look, lower cholesterol means less cardiovascular disease, so we want lower cholesterol. And it's like, that's almost already, just from him saying something like that, it's almost an argument. And you can just change it into a formal argument very easily by being like, okay, like, we want to maximize well-being, lower cholesterol results in more well-being, and just start laying out a formalization. Like, if we want to maximize well-being and this maximizes well-being, then we would. Sorry, I'd have to think about how to formalize it, but you can easily formalize that, right? So it the point. Yeah.
Whereas where it's like paragraphs and paragraphs, reams and reams.
Yeah, that's
trying to simplify it into like propositions is quite difficult because if there's so like you're thinking, oh my god, how many paragraphs are there?
Yeah, well, I mean that
like,
is
the argument. It's like
that's the point where I am suspicious of whether they're making a valid inference. Like I just don't know what they're saying. Because like I mean. Most people who are relatively rational, if you just kind of ask for premises and a conclusion, just be like, look, I just need the gist of what you're saying. Like, what's the conclusion? They'll be like don't eat foods that are high in cholesterol, and you'd be like high in saturated fat or something like this, and you just ask, oh, thanks for the recipe, Vilk. Here it is for anyone on stream who wants this amazing recipe. Yeah, you could just like kind of see the inference, like he's getting from the fact that lower saturated fat intake is going to have less heart disease to like somehow therefore we shouldn't consume things that are high in saturated fat. And you could like easily picture how you might get there. Like maybe like we just say heart disease, that's like gonna cause that's gonna have a bad impact on well-being, and we want to maximize well-being. And then you could kind of set it up like something like if we want to maximize well-being, then we shouldn't do this. We do want to maximize well-being, therefore we shouldn't do this. And it's easy to transform it into a valid argument. And then you would just make some sub-argument for like why the thing in question wouldn't actually maximize well-being, right? So you could have a main argument that's like, if we want to maximize well-being, we shouldn't do this. We want to maximize well-being, so we shouldn't do this. And then you'd make a sub-argument for why doing that thing wouldn't maximize well-being, just some kind of like descriptive argument. So yeah, all I could really say is just like there's people who think coherently and there's people who don't. And if someone thinks coherently, even if they don't know logic, it should be pretty easy to make what they're saying into an argument. But if someone's just incoherent, like you're talking like Foot Soldier or something, like you probably just won't have luck because they probably don't actually have clear enough thoughts that they could even make the thoughts into anything like an argument.
Yeah, oh my god, he was so annoying on that debate that he had of him.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. He's just such a sophist. Like, I just don't know what else to say. He's just the most fucking dishonest person ever. Like, I just don't even know how to deal with people like that. What was bugging you particularly?
Just the fact that he was just I don't know, just really annoying. Like, he didn't really answer any of your questions. He just sort of derailed. He didn't have any premises for the conclusion. He just kept going. I don't know. He just wanted to entertain his viewers, I guess, and just I don't know. He does this kind of, I'm just trying to make a video, being entertaining and shit, but I haven't got anything interesting to say.
It's just useless. Yeah. I mean, the funniest parts in that were when he said, I don't exactly know what constitutes an argument. That was the point where I was like, well, this is just going to be a disaster. Like, this is not going to go well. And then, as if I didn't already know that. And then another point, he said, you're expecting premises and a conclusion. Like, it's absurd. And I was like, yeah. That's like literally what an argument is. Like, of course I'm expecting premises and a conclusion, you idiot.
Yeah, just like brushing it off as if it was just like a stupid thing to say and just laughing. Just like, oh my god.
Yeah, well, it's just
so cringy.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely agree. It's very cringy. Okay. Well, I mean, today was an hour stream. Normally I go a bit longer, but I've got a few things I must achieve. I'm going to do a stream with Insup, actually. Did I tell you guys about this?
Oh, sweet. When?
I think probably tomorrow. He's probably tired now. It's getting late over there, isn't it? Isn't it like 9 or something? I don't know if he'd want to stream at this time. And I have to go do things anyway, so I don't think I can do it today. But
that'll be good. Yeah, I love Insup. He's awesome.
No, try tomorrow. I guess he saw my conversation with Rem, so he wants to have a conversation about objectivism. Well, to be fair, he messaged me just with some points, and then we kind of got into it a bit, and then I was like, well, this could be a whole conversation, so we should do a conversation. He was like, yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Funny thing also, I don't know if you caught this. Did you see my discussion with Rem?
Yes, I've got to like halfway. I kind of put it each morning before I go to work and just try and, because like with your videos, I have to like try and repeat sections of them. Like there's certain parts that I'm really interested in and some parts that I'll just leave and go back to.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I get the kind of gist of it. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
yeah, he's a weird guy.
I actually had a good time talking to him, to be honest. But
yeah.
One thing that I noticed, which Bryn, are you there right now? I don't know if Bryn's there, but Bryn would find this funny. I noticed this after the debate, but on Twitter, he told me that it was impossible to represent his arguments in prop logic and that you had to use deontic logic. And then in the debate, he had formalized the argument in prop logic. So, I mean, he must not actually believe that anymore, which is fine. I think it's a minor point. I don't think it's like a huge gotcha or something. I just think it's kind of funny because I knew he was kind of talking out of his ass on Twitter when he's like, you have to use deontic logic. I was like, no, you fucking don't. There's no way you have to use deontic logic to represent an argument like that.
Oh my god, what the hell is deontic logic?
It's like,
I don't even want to know.
It's like modal logic, but it has concepts like obligation and stuff. It's like you modify prop logic so it lets you use these like other operators like the obligation operator and stuff. But yeah, it's cool. I don't know like the details of it. There's a standard system called standard deontic logic. That's like the main one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's always good talking to you. Is there anything else, like anything we should talk about while we're here, or have we hit the end of anything that's interesting to you?
Not really. That was it, really. I've just been really getting into the prop logic stuff after I did the quiz.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad you're enjoying it. Once it's in your head...
It's really fun, actually.
Yeah.
It's really fun, like, and then when it works, I'm like, oh yeah, I understand it.
Right, yeah. Well, when I first saw it, I was like, she's gonna get so frustrated, she's not gonna want to learn it. But then you just hammered through. I saw you, like, battling the bot for a while, and then finally I saw that you got the role. I was like, nice. Fucking A. That's sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really helpful, because most people just aren't thinking logically at all, and they're just constantly making inferences that are just ridiculous, right? So it's just as good to know how to actually think in a rigid mathematical way, because when you get good at that, then you can just spot errors so much easier.
Yeah, you can just understand your own kind of thoughts as well, and your beliefs and everything, if you just put it into a formal argument. Yeah, and then you realise, actually, why do I believe that thing? This doesn't make any sense.
And it makes it way easier to represent people's positions, and even to talk. Like, I would way rather just summarize someone's position as P or Q and specify what P or Q are, and then have a conversation where I can just shorthand it to P or Q, right? And like just mention whatever inference I'm going to make in a prop logic language, than to sit there every time saying the whole proposition P and the whole proposition Q. It just seems,
saves time.
Yeah, time saver, more clarity. Okay, all right. Well, yeah, much love to both of you guys, and yeah, have a good one.
All right, Isaac. Have a good evening.
Bye, guys.